Hi guys, welcome in the new tutorial. Thanks for joining me again. I am very excited to start this one. It's been a bit delayed, but I'm finally going to start this cat with pastels or pastel pencils on pastel mat. So yeah, really looking forward to doing this one. My paper looks a bit rough because I did the sketch, but then the ear didn't fit. So I had to do the sketch again, a bit smaller. So that's why my paper looks a bit rough. I had to erase. So yeah, but I've done the sketch again. The ear fits now. So make sure that your paper is large enough. I've taken an 8 by 8, but you can do an 8 by 9 if you want to. It makes it a bit easier to fit the ear on there as well. So, I'm working on the color gray, dark gray, by the way. And as always, I'm going to be working with Stabilo Carpatello. And I have one Faber-Castell pit that I want to use. That's the color 175. That's dark sepia, but it's optional. Alright, so I'm going to get started with the eyes. I'm going to try to keep this tutorial rather small. I'm going to keep the drawing quite abstract, so I want to make it colorful, high contrast, but not like a super photorealistic. I want to do it nice and abstract looking. Though it's a beautiful cat. So I am going to put the fur in there and all the white whiskers that are sticking out. I will be skipping the background, so the background will stay gray so that the cat will really nicely show up, both the dark fur and the white fur. So let's get started. For the eyes, I am first going to outline the outer edges a bit, and I'm going to do that with the 175 from Faber-Castell. I'm choosing this one because the Stabilo line doesn't have such a dark gray in the set. If you don't have this one, you can also use, let's see, this one, the 760. It's a bit of a different tone, but it will do the job as well. So I'm just outlining carefully, so make sure to use sharp pencils. Because it's an 8 by 8, it's a rather small drawing as well. I'm hardly pushing. Let's do the outer or the other eye carefully as well. Then you can see some shapes in the eye, like outlining the outline of the iris. I'm doing that with this same tone as well, but very lightly. Because I'm going to be adding loads of colors on top. And then we have the pupil. Let's sketch it out. fill it in very lightly, so we know where it's supposed to be. It's very small. There's a lot of light hitting the eyes. Alright, so there we have a start for our eyes. And let's see, there are some highlights in the eyes, but they aren't very prominent. So let's see what I can do. Yeah, I'm going to sketch them out first with a gray. I'm going to do that with 110. So I'm going to just sketch out the shapes of the highlights a little bit. This is quite a light gray. But I am going to add other tones on top of this highlight. And it's small, so it doesn't have to be exactly the same as on the reference. They do have to be in the right place though, the highlights. Right, so that's the start of the eyes. And what I'm going to do now is, let's start off with the inner corner of the eye and then the eye white. And then save the iris itself for last. So the white of the eye is never white. It's actually a bit grayish looking, and it also has some blue in it. Let's start off for the white of the eye with 722. It's a bit darker than the 110 that I just used, and it has a cool undertone, so a blue undertone. So here we have a bit of the white of the eye showing through as well. Add quite a solid layer. Do you see any white of the eye on the other eye? Nope. All right, so then I'll just leave it at that. Then tiny bit of pink. So this is 681. In the white of the eye as well, adding that a bit in the corner. This inner corner is mainly bluish. So there I'm going to add blue. I'm choosing a darker blue, and this is number 400. You don't need a lot of that because it's a very vibrant color. So just a bit of that right there. And a little bit around the iris. Like that. Almost no pressure. So there we basically have the white of the eye already. A little bit more pink. Then let's darken up the edges a bit more as well and add some more color. So in the inner corner of the eye, I can see a bit of dark violet. So I'm adding 640. This color is very similar to the Faber-Castell Polychromos Caput Mortem Violet. If you work with polychromos, you will know that one. I'm going to add that in the inner corner. Also, a little bit, we have a shadow above the eye. Adding a bit of that as well. I said I was going to keep it abstract, but I probably won't be able to keep it abstract. It will probably turn out realistic anyway. A little bit right there. Just to give it a bit more color. I could go in with black right away for that shadow, but it could look a bit flat. So I'm starting out with this. Adding it around the edges a bit as well on the bottom. And then actually let's add some of the 760 to darken up. Together with the 640, it will create a very nice deep tone. That will look very nice underneath the black as well. Go around the iris. You don't want to make the iris smaller. We want that very wide open look. Actually, I'm going to add this underneath the eye as well. From there we can start adding the fur later on. A bit of that right there. And then right away, let's add some black. So in the inner corner, and above. Let's also take that around the iris a little bit, because the outline right here in the corner is very dark. Make sure to work with very sharp pencils. So I always use the Faber-Castell Color Grip. I have a blue one now. Usually I have the gray ones, but this one is exactly the same. And I really like it for pastel pencils, and actually every pencil. Don't use too much black right away, you can always add more. First, I want to move on to coloring the iris now. So the iris is a bit yellow toned. I can always also see a little bit of green in there. So I'm going to choose some colors to work with. I have two yellow tones, this beige 105 and then 690, which is a bit darker and a bit brighter. Then some greens. Here I have this mint green 545 and a darker green 595. And we can get started with that. And for shadows, I will be adding some brown and some violet as well. First we have to get started with the base tone. So I'm going to get started with a neutral beige with the 105. I'm going to add this lightly, small circular motions. It's a very small area, so we don't want to do any blending with our fingers. Oh, of course, as well, you are free to do it larger if you want to. if you want to do the drawing a bit larger. If you find that easier to do, go ahead. I like to work small, so I'm doing it small. Make sure to not go over the black with your pencil. I'm also avoiding the pupil. I'm going around the pupil a bit. And then filling in this area with a light base layer. And the lighter you keep your pressure, the more layers you can add. So this is a very light color, so we want to create some depth in there. First, to fill up the base layer a bit more, I'm going to add some gray. This is the 722. I'm going to fill up the center of this a bit. On top of that, I'm going to add my green. This gray as an undertone for that will make sure that the green doesn't get too bright or too vibrant. Of course, we have our highlight here, which we will complete later. Make sure you can still see it though. All right, I'm going to add some of the turquoise green, the 545. You can see the green mainly here in the center. I'm going to add a bit of that. The eyes will probably take the longest. The fur won't take very long. But this is such a detailed area. I really want to get this right because the eyes are so important, especially on this cat. He has really nice eyes. All right, so then I want to darken up the yellow a bit. So I'm going to add the 690 and adding that mainly around the edges. And at the top. A little bit of that around the pupil as well. Ignore the pupil for now, we're going to save that for last. All right, so right now there's not enough shadow in the iris yet, so I want to add some shadow. I'm going to do that with 640. It's quite a dark color, so I'm going to add a very light pressure and in circular motions. It doesn't matter if there's a bit of texture in it. You can blend that together with another color later. Just want to make sure that there's a little bit more depth around the edges so that the center gets pushed forward a little bit more. I'm adding this color because this kind of purpley tone will add more color, more depth in there than when you choose like a brown or a neutral brown, for instance, which could look a bit flat. So I really like this color for shadows. Okay, so that has created a nice depth in there. So now I want to blend everything together a bit more. I'm going to do some blending with the 110. You can blend with the pencils themselves. And I'm choosing a gray now to tone down the vibrancy in the eye. Using very little pressure. All right. So now that the whole iris has a base layer, I can go over the highlights again and clean up the shape of that. The eye doesn't need a whole lot more at this point. I can have a little look, see which color that I need. I'm missing a little bit of yellow now, so I'm going back in with the 690, adding it back around the edges again. A little bit at the top. And then finally, I think it would be nice to add a bit of detail. And I'm going to do that with white. I'm going to brighten up the center of the eye. Make sure your white is super sharp. And I'm going to just add little lines to create some texture and some highlights. I'm following the shape of the eye, keeping it on the lower half. The top half has to stay a little darker. Going to brighten up the highlights a little as well. All right, so keeping it abstract is not working out already. I like working detail too much. And then you can see some veiny textures on the eye. I'm going to add some veins with the 640. Very lightly, because we added very little pressure when layering. We can now add very easily those little lines without having to press. They don't need to stand out very well either. Now the final color is 595, a dark green with a blue undertone. With that, I can also add some detailing in the eye. You can see some veins at the top of the eye, which I'm just adding by drawing squiggly lines. Not too much either, like that. And then the iris is basically finished. Oh, I have to fill in the pupil. That's important. So I have my 760 right there. I'm using that first. And I'm really going to draw the shape of the pupil now. So really look at the shape of that. It has a point on both sides. Goes through the highlight as well. All right. And do as little work as you can on that. If you work too long, if you keep adjusting the shape for too long, sometimes you only make the shape worse. So keep it loose. Doing the center with black a little bit. But that's it. Then I want to enhance the line around the iris once again because it got blurred out a little. So let's enhance that, especially at the top and the bottom. Going around the iris once again to really darken up that shadow. All right, don't want to do too much work on the iris now. I'm going to leave it as it is. A little bit more blue. You can always brighten up the center a little bit more if you want more contrast in the iris. A little more white. Alright, so that's it to start with. Let's move on to the other eye right away. Which is colored basically the same, though it's a little lighter. I see more of a grayish tone in it. But I think I'm going to start out with the beige anyway, the 105. With a light base layer. All right, let's get started with that. Then I want to add some gray again, some 722, to fill up this layer and tone down the yellow a bit. All right, so let's start putting in some depth and some color. Taking the 690 again. Adding that at the top. Also at the bottom. Little hint of that on the left side as well. I also want to add a hint of the 545 in the center. Almost no pressure. And that's basically already enough color, but I do need some shadow, so I'm going to add the 640 again. To the bottom where you see some shadow and the top. I can also see a shadow from the top eyelid right there, so I'm drawing that in with this color. Inner corner of the eye, which you can't see that well, but I'm coloring that in with this tone as well. And I'm adding it at the bottom. Want to add a little more color. Some of the 400. I want to create a glassy effect. So the center here has to be a bit darker, and then we have that lighter outer edge of the eye. Like that. And you can blend that color in by using the gray again. So this way you don't need to do any blending with your hands. Let's do some black. So here we have the fur already. We have that inner eyelid shadow. Coloring that black to put in the contrast. And here on the bottom of the eye. There we have the bottom eyelid. This is a really tedious part of the drawing, so take your time for it. Then let's do the pupil now. Again, 760, which is continuing through the highlight. Make sure that both are equal. And then a bit of black only for the center part. Cleaning up the highlight with white now. A little bit of white on the bottom. Now I can see that this eye is a bit different from the other one, so I think I can add a bit more of the 640 for some more depth in there. Around the edges mainly. And then a little bit more of the beige, the 105, because I lost the yellow in the eye a bit, so I'm going to bring it back to match the other eye a little bit better. Now I see that this eye can use a bit more of the green, or the turquoise actually. And I can brighten it up a little more. Alright, so I'm leaving the eyes for now. I want to do the rest first and then come back to the eyes if necessary. But we will get a better idea of the whole drawing if we continue with the fur. So let's do that. So you can see those very bright white whiskers. In order to make those stand out from the fur really well, we have to build up the fur in quite light layers. Otherwise, the white will not, it will not stick to the paper well enough. It will not stand out. So that's a bit of a challenge because we do want the fur to look nice and light. What I'm going to start with is the fur around the eyes. I'm going right in with black, so you can see the eyelids around the eye, which are more pinkish looking. I'm going to avoid those, so I'm drawing around them for now. So let's sketch that out a bit. So usually I don't go in with black right away because it could look a bit flat, but in here I want very high contrast. So I am going in with black right away. But make sure to always work in the right direction. So the fur here, it goes to the left towards the nose. We're going to look at all the different shapes in the fur. Then the fur goes around like that. It curves around the eye. Here I'm leaving open a little edge as well for the bit of eyelid that we have to draw in. And then where the fur gets a bit lighter, I release my pressure so that we have enough space for adding other colors on top. We have here we have in the center a highlighted area. I'm going to skip that for now. So I'm working the black upwards with light pressure. It goes up. To the side. Underneath the eye it goes down a bit. And next to the inner corner of the eye, it goes towards the nose. And curves around. Like that. Then on the forehead, the fur gets a little lighter, so I'm releasing my pressure again. And then I stop where the ear starts. You can see that there are loads of black hairs overlapping the ear. I want to save those for last. So I'm going to do the ear first, later, then draw those black lines on top. It's a very particular angle, this cat. Right, then around the eye we also have a very black area. So let's draw that out with black right away. So I'm only looking at the very darkest parts of the forehead right now. Let's clean up the shape of this eye a little more. Now I can see right away that this eye is too light. So I need some more shading in there. Going to do that a bit with the 760. Just here on the center. That's better. Right, let's get the ears in frame so we can continue with the ears. Or at least the backs of the ears and the edges. So what I'm doing now basically is creating a map for myself, mapping out all the darkest shapes that I see, drawing those in with black, but with a very light hand, so that I can still correct if I want to, or add other colors. Here we have a very dark edge of the ear. Filling in the shape of that. And even with this black alone, I can create nuances. So I can still see which areas need to be darker, which are a little lighter. Then here on the forehead we have a lighter area, so a highlighted area. I'm going to put a base layer with another color there. Other ear also very black. And of course you can also see all those little hairs sticking out from the ear. We're going to draw those in later with another color to make them a bit more subtle. Here we have a very dark part. But I'm not pushing at my hardest or heaviest. Still keeping it around a medium pressure. Alright, so for the forehead we're almost done with the black. I'm not going to fill in this area yet because I'm going to take the risk of smudging then. I don't want to smudge anything, so let's start with this part and finish that first, and then we can work our way downwards and to the right. So first, on the forehead, I can see a bluish hue. So I'm going to start with a blue undertone there. Also, I can see some violet. I'm going to start off with the 760. Create an undertone with that. Always draw your lines in the right direction, although we're not really focusing yet on any hair texture. I'm going on top of the black a bit and then taking this color upwards so that the black gets blended in a bit with this color. So this is not entirely the right color. I can also see quite a lot of purple in there, so I'm going to glaze violet. That's number 138. Really nice color from Faber-Castell. Stabilo doesn't have a color like this. Maybe I can have a look for those who don't have this color. Let's see. No, there's not really a violet like this in this set. That's a bummer. So I really would recommend to get this one because you'll need it in lots of other portraits as well. I use it quite often. Glaze that with a light pressure. Remember that we can work from dark to light, so we will be adding our very lightest colors in the end. Alright, so this is looking very colorful. So now I want to darken up again because the whole base layer looks too light. So now we can make it nice and black, going in with a sharpened black pencil. Now I can clean up the shape of the forehead as well. It's a bit too large. So I'm going over the edges with black, making that forehead just a bit smaller. Right, so that's a lot better. You can do a little bit of blending with your finger. This area is large enough. I'm just going to push these colors into the paper. Get rid of the texture of the paper a little bit. Be careful around the eyes though. And we're going to wait a little bit until we finish this fur on the forehead. I want to do the ears first. And also the eyelids. For the eyelid, let's start with the base tone. I'm going for 640, as I see a bit of a purplish undertone. Let's add that around the eye. And then I'm also going to add some brown. Actually, I think I want 635. Yep, let's go with 635. It's a nice neutral brown. Add that a bit to make the eyelids a bit more natural looking. On top, I'm going over with black as this is such a dark area. Right, so make sure that the eyelids are not too light. They have to blend in well with the rest. I can do a little bit of highlighting on them. Let's do that with a gray, a neutral tone, to make sure that the eyelids don't get too bright colored. So I'm taking 1010 or a 110 and just highlighting some areas like the corner of the eye, which is a little lighter. Doesn't need to be much. Bottom. All right. I still want to add a bit more shading on top of the iris here. It still looks a bit too light. So there's always a little shadow over the top half of the eye. So I have to put that in, otherwise it doesn't look lively enough. All right, that's better. Alright, so let's start off with the ears now. So the ears have a bit of a pinky inside, but you see lots of hairs coming out. So we need to make sure that these base layers inside of the ears are light enough. So trouble with adding those light hairs on top. First, let's choose some color for the base layer. I'm definitely going to be using the 640 again. And then the 681 as well. Maybe some gray to tone down the colors. So that's 722. I'm going to get started with the 681. Adding that as a light base layer inside the ear. Filling this in. It doesn't need to be very thick. Maybe I need a darker gray even. I think I'll have to go for 724 instead. Yes, I'm going to add 724, which is one tone darker than the 722. It's also a blue toned gray. I'm going to use this to just blend this in a bit. Let's go around the edges with it. still quite a light color though. We just need to create a base. It doesn't have to be perfect just yet. Then for some more color, the 640, I'm going to focus that here on the inside and on the center, not necessarily on the outer edge. Alright, then I also see some brown. I'm also going to be adding the 635. A little bit of that. And then some 760, the dark bluish gray again. I'm going to use this to soften all the edges. Also here in the transition from the forehead into the ear. Then eventually I'm going to add black. Let's blend that together. So now we created quite a nice dark base layer. And the hairs that we will be drawing on top, the light hairs, will stand out from that quite nicely as well. A little bit of black. A little bit more black at the start of the ear. Alright, we have a good base tone now. So now I'm going to start adding the very light hairs coming out from the ear. You can see that inside the ear they look a bit darker. Then when they come out they look more like white. So actually I think I'm going to get started drawing them in with 722. And then move on to 110 and finally some white. I don't go in with white right away because that will look flat. All these hairs have different tones in them. So let's take 722 and I'm going to start the hairs right in the inner corner of the ear and then draw quick motions. Because this base layer is quite dark, even these gray hairs will already stand out really well. You don't need to push hard. Make sure to make some of the hairs overlap. They can all go in different directions. They do curve a bit downwards, so make sure to put that in. And not too much. Not too many hairs, I mean. This is enough for this first layer of light hairs. I do some tapping at the base of the hairs to make sure that, that they come out of the ear nicely. I'm going to do some with the 681, just inside the ear a bit, like that. And now I'm going to move on to 110. I'm going to go over some of the hairs. So some of them I'm going to highlight, especially where they come out of the ear. So where they start overlapping the paper, that's where the hairs get lighter. And if some of the hairs are a bit too long, I'm just going to rub over them really lightly to make them fade out a bit. And finally, some of them I'm going to really highlight with white. But make sure to not overdo it, because you want to keep the depth in there. Alright, so that's it for the really light hairs. Now I do want to put in some more depth in between the hairs, some more darkness here and there. So I'm going back in with the 640 and just carefully darken up at the base in between those hairs. I think this is a drawing that will really come together when you put in those final whiskers. Until then, it will probably look very unfinished. A little bit of black as well, in between those hairs, carefully. Alright, and what you can do then is add some of the hairs from the forehead overlapping the ear, to overlapping those light hairs. Just a few. Alright, that's ear 1. And ear 2 we'll be doing in exactly the same way, though there's a little bit more detail in this ear. So we're going to spend a little more time on creating the inner or the inside before we move on to adding the light hairs. So here I see gray. Probably going in with the 724 again the 681, the 640, and brown. Oops. I think I also need this color. This is 642, which is very similar to the 640, but a bit lighter. I'm also going to use this one. I think this will look very nice right here. Let's start with that. Creating a base tone of that. Right here, deep inside the eye or ear. It's getting late already. Take that upwards a bit more. It's a very opaque color, so I don't push too much. It's going all the way down, letting it overlap a bit of the black fur, so we can do a smooth transition later. Alright, so that's only there in the center. I'm going to move on to a bit of brown, the 635. Continue that upwards. Filling in the rest of the ear with that. Also overlapping some of the black. To the tip, we can always clean this up later. And then I'm going to switch to 640. Create some texture in there. There are some pigment marks in the ear. It's not very even color, so I'm going to try to recreate that by just creating little marks of this color in the ear. Eventually, most of this is going to be covered up, of course. A little bit of that right here, deep inside. In between the darker marks, we have some lighter marks, which I'm adding with the 681, light pink tone. Then I'm going to add a little 724 on top of this pink tone to tone it down, because otherwise it would be a bit too vibrant. So I'm just glazing that. And then I'm going back to black. Take it inwards to make it blend with all these colors. So I want to have a bit of a smoother edge. Look at the shapes on the edge of the ear at the bottom. Cat ears have very particular shapes to them. Taking the black inwards lightly at the top, and then I will do some blending. So let's blend all these colors together. As there's some black in there, it will darken up this base layer right away as well, which I want, because then the white hairs will stand out really well. Once again, I'm going in with black to clean up the edges of the ear. And I do want to add a bit more brown. A bit more darkness. So I'm going back in with a brown. It's hard to get that deep color that I'm looking for. Adding the 640 on top of the brown to darken it up. Again, a bit more brown. You want to have the brown showing through on the top quite nicely. All right. Then before we start adding the hairs, I'm going to add some shadow inside the ear with 760. Just to create a bit more depth in there. Blending that in. And then we are ready to add the hairs. So I'm going to get started with, these hairs are very bright. I think I'm going to start off with 110 right away. you can also see some very small hairs overlapping the black. You can also put those in. You can see that the hairs start here and then they curve a bit. Then they go to the right. Try to do it quickly. Make some a bit shorter, make some a bit longer. You can vary with that. They don't need to be perfect. But do make sure to work fast so you don't get squiggly lines. There are also some white hairs coming from the back of the ear. You can see that there's a large clump of hair right here in the center. All right, I think that's enough. With this tone, I'm going to switch to to white and highlight some of those hairs. Sharp pencil. You can also highlight parts of the hair. You don't have to highlight the whole hair. Usually the tip is a bit more highlighted. All right. Then you can go back in with black, go in between the hairs at the base of them, where it's a bit darker. It will make the white hair stand out extra well as well. Now we can also complete the black hairs from the forehead that are overlapping the ear. So let's sharpen this, and then with quick motions I'm going to create the hairs which are going upwards. Make sure to vary with these hairs, make every hair different. And then after this, we can also finish the forehead, the details right there. All right, so to do some detailing on the forehead, on the fur right there, I'm going to use some gray, probably starting off with some 724. You can see that there are some lighter hairs overlapping the ears a little bit. So I'm just drawing some light hairs on the edge of the forehead, no pressure. Because of the blue and the purple underneath, you can just use gray and it will look colorful enough. A little bit in between the eyes. The fur there is shorter, so you can use shorter strokes. And next to the ear as well. On the forehead, the fur is curving upwards. It's very subtle. And then you can take a lighter color. Let's do 110. You can highlight some of the hairs with that. Add some of the dust particles on the forehead that you can see. Next to the eye, we have some very highlighted hairs. But eventually, most of this fur as well is going to be covered up by all those whiskers. A little bit more purple glazing I can see. So I'm adding a bit more of that. Might even add a tad of blue, so this is 440. Let's add some hairs with that. Alright, so what I want to do now is move on to the rest of the face, and I'm going to put down a base layer. Basically on the whole face, and I think I'm going to do the neck as well. Just do a quick base layer and then start working around to add all the details. So this area that we just did was the hardest when you look at all the small details, and the rest should be able to go a little bit faster. So let's start doing that. I'm going to work with spaces. Start putting down a black base layer on the black fur. And then you can add the lighter details on top. And you have little areas like here on the nose that are lit up. So there I don't put a black base layer. I'm going to put down a gray base layer. So I have a little more space to do the detailing there. So we have also a little bit of a lit up area right here underneath the eye. And underneath the other eye, so that are the areas that I am going to skip with the black. But I am going to put down a black base layer on the rest. So let's start right here next to the eye, where the fur is really, really black. I put down a solid black base layer because I want high contrast in this drawing. So look at that shape right there, that lit up shape, which I'm going to skip for now. And this whole cheek area is very dark. Right here we have some lighter hairs, so let's do a little bit less pressure there. Always keep working in the right direction. So watch where those hairs are going. So this is all very black right here. And then on the edges, I'm making the black fade a little bit more. I'll be adding some other colors there as well. And those edges don't have to be detailed yet. I just release my pressure so I have enough room there for more colors. I see some black right there. We have a little shadow underneath the cheekbone. So I'm only adding some black right there. This whole side is lit up. So let's keep it like that for now. No black on this side. Then the nose is also quite dark. The nostrils are a little bit darker than the nose itself, so I'll be coloring in the nostrils with black, but make sure it's very sharp. I'm going to sharpen this first. Very sharp, and then look closely at the nose. You can lighten up the photo a little bit if it's too dark to look at. I'm going to make this black. Then connecting that with this black area on the side. So that's for the nose. Let's continue with a bit of base layering still. So look at the direction of the fur. So actually on the side of the nose, the fur curves around, and then it goes like outwards again. So towards the sides of the cheeks. And here we have some large white parts. So I make sure to not add as much black right here. Going around that lit up area as well. Doesn't need to have exactly the same, the right shape yet. And that's all very black. So that whole cheek area, very black. Let's color that in, quite solid. And then releasing my pressure when I get towards the ends. Also watch the shape of that black mark on the face. So here the black, solid black fur transitions into very light and flimsy hairs. I only go this far with the black. Those lighter hairs I will add with other colors. Not adding too much pressure because I want those very wide whiskers to go on top in the final stage. So I have this pencil right here. I got sanded to test out, and this is supposed to be an even blacker pastel pencil than the Stabilo one. So I'm testing it out right now. This is Cretacolor number 2. And actually, it seems to be a lot darker. That's nice. I didn't know about this pastel pencil yet. It's very black, really nice. I think I will not use it too much, but in this very dark area of the cheek, very nice. Yeah, I like it. This is a would recommend if you draw black animals often with pastel pencils, or if you draw with pastel pencils a lot in general. This is a very nice one. Yep, I like that. Maybe I will use it inside the nostrils as well. All right, let's continue. Continuing the black just a little bit more. And here we have the transition from the black into the white fur, which is also a bit brownish looking. So I will not add too much black. So here we have the shape of the muzzle. The muzzle is a little bit blackish right there. But I don't want to the shape of it, the shape of the muzzle, so I'm doing it lightly. Really looking at that white marking. It gives the cat a lot of character. It will also make the drawing look a lot better now when the muzzle is finished, because those lines, they look a little bit scary. Not too much black there yet. I do want to add a little bit of black on the left side, but only at the bottom. Alright, before we get to the muzzle and the nose area, I want to finish the base layer on the left, which is lighter. So let's see which color I can use for that. It has a warm gray undertone, I feel. So I might use 708 if I can find it. There it is, 708. It's a dark gray with a warm undertone. This will be a base layer for the cheek area, going a little bit darker than what I want the cheek to be in the end. I'm only adding a light base layer of that because I do think I want to add some coal gray on top of there as well. It looks more like a mixture of the two. Going around the muzzle. Yeah, let's add some 724 on top of that. Here we have the highlights in the bottom eyelid. Watching the fur texture now. I think I need some 726 as well. It's a little darker. Looks a lot like the 708, but it's a cool undertone. You can see the difference. So this one is cool, this one is warm. I'm going to add that, the 726. With this I'm also going to add those little hairs sticking out, very small hairs. So I'm doing it quite fast and I'm holding the pencil very lightly. So that's only a start. It still looks a bit weird, so we need to finish this. I'm going to add some 760. Just a little bit more black. I try to keep the edges very soft. Don't want any harsh lines on the cheeks. So I'm blurring the edges out a bit with my finger. I think I need some violet as well. Let's add some more color there. I'm going to glaze some violet. 138. Just a bit more color. And I think I want to highlight with blue. So the highlighted hairs on the left side I'm going to do with blue. Let's see which blue I can use for that. I think 435. Give this side a little more color. So I have 435 here. It's a very light blue. So the biggest goal here is to make sure to keep everything very soft looking. I don't want any harshness. I also want to do some highlighting with white, just to highlight the very brightest hairs. And also the bottom eyelid right here. It's a tricky part. This eye might be a little bit too round. I think it's fine. The eyes could use a little bit more color though. I'm going to add a little bit of the 690, just add a little bit more color on both. You can basically do endless mixing on that, but let's continue for now. Let's fill in this area, this lit up area. I'm going to do that with 724, a little bit darker than I want this to be, because we can do the highlights with a lighter color. So just look at the shape of that, make it an abstract shape. Going over with a bit of violet to give it some more depth. Then you can mix it in a little bit with the black, make the edges a bit softer. And I'm going to do the same on the bridge of the nose. So I'm starting off with 724. Solid base layer in the shape of that highlight. Little bit of violet on top. Then a bit of mixing. Actually, now I see that this part can also use a bit more violet. Nice and colorful. Now we'll leave that for now. Let's do a base layer on the muzzle first. See some black right here? But it's surrounded by very light hairs. Then underneath that we have that very light marking again. Need to clean up the shape of the muzzle before I do a base layer on it. The shape has to be correct. Let's do a base layer of a white or a light. You can see that there's a lot of pink there, a pink hue on the chin there and also on the lips. So for the base layer, I will not do solid white. I think I will mix gray with beige and also a little bit of, so we still have some room for adding lighter details. So I want to use 110 together with 700 and 681. I'm going to start off with the 110. I'm going to look at that shape really well. Around the nose. Also using it on this side. Look at the shape. It doesn't need to perfectly connect to the black just yet. Alright, so that's the upper part. It catches the most light. I'm going to continue with the 700, which is a little bit more yellowish looking. I'm going on top of that actually to make this base layer a little bit more yellow. Continuing with the 681. Then we're going to finish this off later because we have all these little hairs and whiskers sticking out, which will really complete that area. But for now we keep it tight and abstract. You can clean up a bit with black around. Also going to clean up on this side. Don't be afraid if that looks weird, it will all come together in the end. Then we also have to fill in the center line, of course, and the nose. Let's fill this in with, 726, the center line in between the two upper lips. Doing that with a dark gray. And then the nose, let's do that with the dark gray as well, with the 726 to start with. So this is too light, it needs to be darker, but I do need some depth in there. I don't want it to be solid black. I'm going to add some 640. Let's glaze that on top to make it a bit warmer looking. I'm going around the nostrils because I don't want to lighten them up and I don't want to smudge them. Alright, and then I'm going on top with black. I'm not going to push very hard, I just want to darken this up. I also added a little bit of black, just some tiny little hairs on the bridge of the nose to already create some texture there. So now I do want to do a little bit of highlighting on the nose, which I want to do with blue with the 435 again. I'm just going to highlight the top a little bit, which is not really in the reference. And the highlighting, I'm also going to do with blue to start with. So I'm just drawing tiny hairs. A little bit on top of the black as well. Very tricky part. And then finally, a little bit of white. Just going to highlight some of the hairs that are hit by light on the bridge of the nose, making sure to leave open enough space in between. I don't want to highlight every hair. I'm basically going to do the same on this area, so make sure to go in the right direction. Short strokes. So first blue and then white. And then you can always go in between with a little bit of black to make sure it's not just a solid area of highlight, but also darken up some of the hairs in between. Alright, let's keep going with the base layering on the chin. So you can actually see the inside of the mouth a little bit and the lip. So it's kind of red looking. So I think I need a bit of a reddish brown tone for a base layer there. Let's go for 670, which is more of an orange, but I don't want to go like too pink there, or not yet. I'd rather add it than having to tone it down. I think I'm also going to add some 642, which is more of a pink tone. Yeah, that looks nice together. Let's also add it in between the lips. The lip itself I'm going to highlight with 681. So this is going to be the bottom lip. And then we can darken up the inside of the mouth a little more. Let's add a little bit of red, but not too much. This is 310. A little bit of red. And then for the base layer on the chin, I'm going for 700. To make sure that your graphite lines are light enough. So let's lighten this up, otherwise it will show through. We don't want that. So look at the shape of the chin. It's very round. So I'm first going to add the chin in a very basic shape, so that round shape. No hairs yet. I'm also going to add a bit of that 681 on top. Let's continue that actually. All the way. So then the muzzle is really going to start to take shape. Long strokes because the fur is getting longer here. Actually, let's clean up. Let's clean up the shape of the muzzle. The black fur is overlapping here a little bit, so let's add some black back like that. And then I'm also going to add some of that yellow beige, that 105. some more color to this fur. We don't want to make it solid white. So there's pink in there, there's yellow in there. There's a lot of that, this color, this 642, there's a lot of that on the muzzle. So let's glaze that. I'm going to glaze that lightly on most of the muzzle. Not too opaque. This will give a really nice shadow tone to the muzzle. Also on the chin. Tap that in a little to make it blend, but be careful with the black. Alright, so that's really nice. Now we can start adding the details. I'm adding some 640. Can use a little bit of gray to divide the up lip and bottom lip. Don't need a lot of shadow there. Just a little bit. Soften up the edges. So I'm adding a little bit more black around and then tapping it in with my finger. So we also have those little lines where the whiskers are coming out of, which I'm carefully sketching in with the 642. Let's soften up the edges of the lip a bit, that the lines are not so harsh. Tapping this in. Now we're getting ready for adding all those white hairs that you can see coming through. Let's start with that. So this is very light, so you won't be able to see the white very well, but we can highlight some of the hairs here. Quick lines. And make them overlap the black a bit. But we don't want to lose the shape of the muzzle. See all those little hairs on top of the black. You can add those quite easily, but you have to work quickly. The whiskers will come later, so we'll leave those. It's just the shape of the muzzle and those markings right now. I think I'm going to add some blue to this edge. Right here, a little bit of blue. Give it a bit more depth. And this shape is not completely correct yet. So I can go around with black to clean that up. A very delicate piece to draw. Actually takes more time than I was anticipating. And the chin can be a whole lot more pinky. Let's add a little more of that 642. Bit of shadow on the chin, so shadows in between the hairs with 640. Can tap those in a bit. Alright, so now we're almost ready to do the base layer on the body. What I want to do first is just finish this little area and then move on downwards. Make sure all these graphite lines are gone. I think I will try to do this video in just one part, so the whole drawing in one video. It will be a very long video though, probably about 4 hours, so I hope it will work out. Alright, so you can see all these light hairs sticking out, and then you can see the black hairs going on top. So what I want to do first is those white hairs, so I can then very easily draw the darker hairs on top. Let's see. So I see gray in there. It's very white fur, but let's start off with a gray so we have some room for highlighting later. So I'm going to start off with 110. And just a little bit of some light hairs. You don't see a lot here behind the ear, but I'm going to place some down anyway. And then here the hairs are starting to get longer. Let's sharpen this pencil. And the hairs are going in all kinds of directions and they are very fuzzy looking, so I'm twisting my pencil to get some twisty lines as well. Light pressure. I'm going over several times to get rid of the paper texture a little bit already. And this is all part of the face. Okay, let's start with that. I think I want to add some other colors as well. Let's do a little bit of some darker gray, 724, just in the transition from the black into the light gray, to get a softer transition there. A little bit of that. And then I also see a tiny bit of like a pinky color of this color, 642, which I'm also going to add on this transition as well. Maybe a tad of blue, number 400. I want a very nice colorful transition here, not too much blue though. And then I can do a little bit of blending with my finger just on that transition, not on the light gray itself. Then we should have a very nice transition, and then I can start drawing my black hairs on top. Maybe a little bit more gray before we do that. Back to the 110, lighten up some hairs. And keep it very spontaneous, so I don't want any hair to be the same as another one. They all have to be different. Alright, I'm going to add some of these hairs with dark sepia. You can do it with black as well, but you need to release pressure. It will be too dark if you push too much. I want these hairs a little softer and lighter, just overlapping the white, being a bit random with it. A bit of 760, the dark blue, just a bit. Maybe a little bit of 640, the dark purple violet color. Tap that in, and then I'm switching to black. Darken up this fur a little bit more. right. So that's some of that soft fur sticking out from the edge. Let's move on to the breast area. So here you can see a little bit of the color showing through. I'm going to leave that out. So I'm just going to start off with a nice base layer. You can see here underneath the chin, it's more warm looking and a bit darker. And then right here on the edge, it's lighter and cool looking. I'm going to get started with 105 for this breast area. Might be a little bit too yellow, but we can tone it down. Working in the direction of the fur growth, so it goes like around and then downwards. Then to make that a little bit darker, I'm going on top with a warm gray tone. A warm gray will look nicer with this yellow tone than a cool gray. So let's see. Let's do 720 going on top. All right, let's start with that. We can always make it darker. Let's already blend that in a little bit. Now I'm going to continue with the other colors, with the cooler looking colors. Getting started with 722, a cool gray. Relatively dark compared to how light I want to go in the end. But I like getting started a little bit darker than needed. It's also important that you keep seeing the shape of the chin. Look at the fur growth, like here it's going like outwards again. Erasing the graphite lines. For the edge, I want to use 110 again. So let's switch to 110. Let's get this edge nice and light. Being careful on the very tips of the hairs again, so switching to my wiggly, twisty motions. Try to keep this very natural and flowy looking. That's what I like about the photo as well. So this can be quite a thick layer. So here the first switching to black again. We don't need that edge to be perfect yet. So here the fur is getting more salmon-y, pinky colored again. I'm switching to my 681 for the base layer here. All right, and then let's finish off this side. The white fur goes all the way down. And let's work on those edges a little bit more, those tips. Alright, so before I start doing any detailing, I want to do some more base layering first, deepen some of the colors, like right here, can be a little darker. So I think I will get a darker, a warm gray. This is number 7. Oh, very hard to read. 706. 706. That's this color. As you see, this goes very nicely with the beige. Adding that in this shadow area. And then to get some color in the fur, I want to glaze a little bit of the 642. Especially like here in the center. So I use almost no pressure here, very light pressure. Just want to change up the tone a little bit more. also so that it fits with the colors on the muzzle. Alright, I'm going to blend that in. Blending that out pretty smoothly. Now I'm going back in with the 706 once again, and now I'm going to look more closely at the shadows in between the clumps of fur I can see here underneath the chin. I'm going to draw those in a bit more carefully now. And then I can draw the lighter hairs alongside those. You can just add a little bit of structure and depth into the fur already without having to add the lighter hairs yet. Basically adding the shadows in between the lighter clumps of hair now. So I'm not looking at individual hairs, I'm looking at clumps of fur. And then for this part, let's do the base layer here as well. You can see a little bit of brown, a little bit of blue, all kinds of different colors. But I think I'm going to just start off with black. All the way up to the lighter hairs. Keeping the line quite tight right now. I'm going to soften that transition, of course. Alright, so here the fur is getting lighter. So I'm going to switch to another color there. Starting off with a solid black base layer because I want to keep the body area quite undetailed and dark. So I want the face to catch the most attention. Alright, for this edge I'm switching to 760, the dark blue. Alright, so that's a very basic layer right there. And then here I left open a bit of space because you can see some brown there. Taking 635, putting down a base layer there. Not sure what it is, it looks like the knee. And then this looks a bit flat, a bit weird, so I'm going to add 640 on top of that. And then I will mix it a bit with the black. Also 640 on the back. I'm also going to add 640 on this transition between the two fur colors. Then eventually I can add all those little white hairs overlapping the black fur, which creates a really fluffy and natural transition. Alright, let's do some blending first. I'm going to blend this knee part with the rest to make it a bit less prominent. Then the back, I will finish this edge off as well later, keeping that for last. Then I'm going to blend just on this transition very carefully. I don't want to blend any black into the light fur. Alright, that looks nice and soft. I can now start adding all the details. So let's just start here. I feel like This chin area still looks a bit too yellow, so I'm going to go over it with 642. Very lightly, just to change up the tone a little bit, also in the shadow parts. Right, going to blend it. Don't use your dirty finger for this. You will get black into your fur. So I'm choosing a clean finger and just tapping that in. Now I can start adding the details, finally. My favorite part. Let's get started. Maybe I should go for a bit of a neutral beige. Let's do 700 for this area. So I don't want to go in with white yet, especially not for the shadow parts, like this area on the chest. That will be too light, so I'm going in with 700. I'm just going to recreate all the different clumps of fur that I see, the lighter clumps of fur. I'm not pushing super hard either. That area doesn't need to be very detailed. I want to keep it toned down a little bit more. Bit of hair on the chin. And then I can always go back in between those clumps of fur again to darken up the shadow parts. Keeping it with the warm tones, sticking with the warm tones here. So this is 600, no, what is it? What's it called? 706 again. So I like building up my pastel drawings in many light layers like this. Then for this area, which looks more cool, I want to go in with 110 and white. Actually, I want to go in with white right away. So you can see that here we have a lit up area. Going in with white. Adding those squiggly lines again. Twisting the pencil. Not too much white yet. Alright, I'm going to continue with 110, doing some more hairs overlapping the dark fur. I think I don't want to do too much anymore to the fur. I think it looks very soft and very flowy right now, and I quite like that. So it's not as detailed as on the photograph, but I like how it looks right now. So I think I will keep it like this, maybe a little bit more depth with 724 here and there. Maybe I also want to darken up that part. Going to add some 708. It's one shade darker than the 706 I used for the shadows here. I'm going to add a little bit of this on top. Just darken up here and there. All right, and then I do want to do some detailing here on the back. I'm going to do some highlighting on the left with a bit of blue, 435. Just highlighting some of the individual hairs. Bit more color, 642. I'm also going to do some highlighting here and there with blue, just creating some light hairs on the black. A little bit more depth in the fur by adding black in between the lighter hairs. A little more 642. And I'm going to lightly tap the edges to make them soft. I think we're ready then to do the whiskers. A little bit more shadow here. So now I'm just going to jump around, see what I can adjust. right, it's time to add the whiskers. The very most important thing I think about this drawing. I'm going to do the whiskers mainly with white. Yeah, I think I will just keep with white. Maybe just darken up this part a tad more. A little bit of brown. Alright, so let's get started. The whiskers I'm doing quite quickly. If you do slow motions, you have a bigger chance of getting wiggly, squiggly whiskers. So I'm doing quick motions. I'm going to start with the ones on the forehead. Right, so I'm starting where the whiskers are starting to come out of the fur, and then I'm going quick. Alright, I need a paper underneath my hand, otherwise I'm going to completely smudge my drawing. If I want to soften them, I'm going over with a kneaded eraser a little bit. Alright, I'm going to switch to 110. I'm also going to tape down this side because the paper's coming up and it's quite annoying. Alright, let's do the ones on the left. Alright, that's going a bit easier. Same on the other side. And then for the ones overlapping the rest of the fur, I'm going to use white again. Alright, some of the, whoops, this one broke. Alright, so I wanted to highlight some of the whiskers with no, what's it called? Blue. Very hard. Blue on the tips. So this is 435. Just a little bit of blue for a bit of color. And if I want to clean up some of the shapes of the whiskers, I can just go around with the surrounding color, like black here, to just sharpen those lines a bit more. And I think with that, we are almost done. Just some cleaning up here and there. Also going in with the black Creed color one more time. It's a really nice black pencil. I'm definitely going to use this this more often. Sorry for my voice, I have no idea what happened. Really love this color. Alright, so this black creedy color is definitely a would recommend. And that concludes this drawing. This was a really fun one to make. Very interesting as well. Some final touch-ups. If you've made this one, show me your results on Facebook or on Instagram, because I'm really curious how yours turn out. Find it very hard to stop. Alright, I'm going to stop now. So this is the finished result. There will be a post of it on Instagram and Facebook as well. And I hope you like this one. So yeah, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.